This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to another podcast episode on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. You're listening to Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, my cousin, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. What's up, cuz?
So I got an embarrassing story to tell you. Let's just kind of start with the You Suck Award here, because I'm going to get it this week. I'm just calling it right now. I'm going to get it this week. And this all took place Friday evening. We had a surprise party for one of my good buddies, Matt. We were hanging out. It was like a giant adult pizza party. I don't know if you've ever attended a giant adult pizza party. It's basically a pizza party like you have when you're a child, but you get to drink beer instead of pop, so it's a lot more fun. Anyways, we are at the buddies right there on, was it Hayes and I think 21 Mile Road, and we're all waiting for him, this, that, the other thing. As you know, and most of you don't know, I'm getting ready to go on a trip to Jamaica here in probably about another month or so. That's for a buddy of mine. He's having a destination wedding. So the wife and I are sitting there trying to watch what we eat, and as you know, pizza is probably not the best thing for the diet, right? Right.
Then there's something wrong with you. You're certainly not very good.
Well, thank you, Donald. This is kind of what happens now. So we're at this party, and basically pizza and beer is served and provided for you by my buddy Matt's parents and his girlfriend. I'm not sure about his girlfriend's parents, but it was all basically paid for. You just had to show up. That was cool, and that was awesome. But my wife's like, can I get a salad? Is that possible? I was like, yeah, we'll just order a salad, and we'll just make sure we get the bill. No big deal. Something happened because I told the waitress, I said, we'd like to get a salad. Can we get an antipasto? And can you just bring us a check? Just give us the check, and we'll be good to go, and make sure nobody else gets this bill. Because I kind of know how his girlfriend is, and his parents are awesome, by the way. What's up, Mr. Stoyanov? I got to sit there and meet him. He's a longtime listener of ours. He enjoys our product. He's a great guy. Had a nice, great conversation with him. He's a totally awesome guy. Also, Mrs. Stoyanov, what's going on? The waitress never brings us the bill. Next thing you know, bills are getting passed around. And I'm like, can we get our bill? And the waitress is like, no, it's already taken care of. I was like, no, you don't seem to understand. We kind of ordered off the menu here. You were supposed to bring us the bill. I remember when I said, bring us the bill. Don't give this to anybody else. Well, it turns out, I guess Matt's girlfriend ended up picking up our salad, which was super embarrassing because we go to a place where everything's already provided to you. And then we ordered something extra, like a bunch of ingrates. I felt like I totally disrespected Matt's parents. I felt like I totally disrespected Matt's girlfriend. And I felt like I totally disrespected their hospitality. I felt like a total ass. So I think for that, I should get the You Suck Award.
So I understand. So it's already paid for an event that you went to. Mm-hmm. Are you mad at the waitress, or is it something that she just kind of, the girlfriend just took care of the bill and was just kind of like, oh, it's okay. It's only like, what, $6-7 extra, and she just took care of it? Or are you mad at the waitress, or how are you looking at the situation? Obviously, they know that you wouldn't just go there and freeload.
Right.
So,
well, I'm not happy with the waitress. I'm more upset at the fact that I feel like we look like really bad guests. You know what I'm saying? Like we attended something that was everything was already taken care of. All you had to do was just show up and just have a good time. And then we went and we basically ordered off the menu, and somebody else got stuck picking up that bill. And I didn't want somebody else to pick up that bill. I wanted to take care of it. So, and I tried throwing some money at Matt's girlfriend, and she wouldn't take it. And this went back and forth for probably about 15, 20 minutes. And it was one of those things where I totally felt like I was embarrassed, and I felt like an asshole.
Listen, these things happen. I think the next time, as a learning experience for you, you just give them the money along with the order. You just say, look, take this card and put it on a tab, start something separate, and just give it to them right then and there. Because if you involve anything at all, people are so distracted that you give them a command, and within probably 4 minutes, they get 2 or 3 other commands, and they totally forget. And usually when you want something to go down on the hush-hush, like you don't want people to know, like, hey, we're ordering stuff off the menu or trying to do something separate here, and you're trying to avoid feeling embarrassed. That's when it always happens. And I've come to the realization that you have to double check, triple check, and sometimes quadruple check everything because people are so distracted. They got other things going on, and the incidence of ADHD is so real that you could tell somebody something 1 second and 4 seconds later they totally forget or they misconstrue something, and it always ends up negatively affecting you. And you listen, I know you're not trying to put out people and stuff like that, but sometimes you go to a place and you just feel like a salad, or you don't want to eat, some greasy type food, or you don't want to eat too heavy, or something goes on. And I don't think you have to feel too bad, but next time you have to be more assertive, and you just have to say, look, here's the money for this salad. We're ordering it. Swipe it right now. Let's take care of it, because otherwise you have this and you have egg all over. You have egg all over your face.
Yeah. And that's probably what I should have did. I probably should have either just gave her my card or just given her the cash right there on the spot and said, here, let's not mess this up. And instead, like you said, I end up leaving with egg on my face, and I feel like a total putz.
Well, props to the wife. I think that I saw that she took her final quiz, and she's on her way to graduating grad school from Michigan.
Yep, that's right. She will be a nurse practitioner. Well, she'll have graduated nurse practitioner graduate school. I think that's how it works out. I don't know. I sat there and I calculated her GPA the other day, and Michigan for some reason gives out A pluses. So she's probably going to graduate with an A plus. I figured out her GPA to be like 4.2. 4.3 is technically an A plus, but anything over an A, that's an A plus, right? So 4.2 for her GPA. So she rocked it, man. She killed it.
Nice.
I like that drop. That's nice.
All the gadgets.
Super smart, man. She is definitely going to be the best nurse practitioner in the world. She's already the best nurse in the world, so she's got the brains in the family. That's for damn sure. Well,
shout out to DSP Nation. When we do this project, we reach so many milestones that sometimes we just don't take time to stop and appreciate it, from earning credentials to being invited to certain press conferences to covering events around town. And then the reaction to the draft shows and the articles that we've been putting out has been awesome. And I really think that our connections that we've built, not only through our relationships via our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, but through branching out with others who work through sites like Pride of Detroit, our former working relationship with Detroit Sports Nation, other type sites, has really helped us to extend out. And funny story, did you hear the story about the supermodel Michigan fan who got her site kicked off of Instagram?
No.
Okay, Elle Johnson. I don't know if you follow her from time to time. She is
I'm going
a
to
super
Google
fan.
her right now.
Yes, she tweets out a lot of revealing type photos, and she's a supermodel, but she's a pro-Michigan-centric Michigan fan. And twice now, her Instagram account has been closed down. And the first time, she got it back because of social media outcry. Well, yesterday, she posted another post to her Twitter page and said it happened again. She went to her Instagram page, and they shut it down. So I just said, hey, that's not right. That's censorship, because she made a valid point. She's like, look, big businesses like Sports Illustrated, other type models are having a hard time keeping their stuff up there, and some sites get to stay on there and some don't. And she's like, I don't know why, my posts are getting deleted, and they are a little bit risque and things like that. But I said, free Ellie, and I put hashtag Instagram, and she tweeted back to her 100,000 followers, love you guys. Thank you for the support. And it got picked up. Her tweet to us got picked up from a couple online publications where, they include tweets, giving context to their articles. So our stuff kind of sprinkles around. And that's kind of how we do it, in that we just interact via social media and things like that. And through that, we've been able to grow, and this week's numbers have been amazing. And
she's kind of fit, right?
Yeah, she's super fit. Blonde
hair?
Yep.
Yeah, I found her.
Yeah, so
nice.
she loves us with a Go Blue kiss she sent us on
awesome.
a message on Tuesday. But through the relationships we build, just through messaging people or through working relationships with others, we've been having great numbers and great success. And I always want to give thanks to those that have been appreciative to us. So it's been a good week.
I'm just saying, bro. If you don't know who this is, you need to go find her.
What's her Twitter tag? What's her hashtag now?
I have no idea what her Twitter. I just Googled imaged her.
Gotcha.
And I'm going to be lost for hours here. Why did you bring this up now? You should have brought this up at the end of the show.
All right.
Show's over.
Show's over.
I'm going to be busy here for a little bit.
Listen, everyone that's downloading it, it's the Super Bowl for Lions fans. It's Christmas. It's the NFL Draft Day, baby. Here we go.
That's
How
right.
excited are you?
Draft Day! Oh, dude, I'm super pumped, man. Hey, look, you don't sit there and you don't wake up early on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays when the underwear Olympics are going on, and you sit there and get nestled into your couch and sit there and watch this stuff. Watch grown-ass men run around in their underwear for hours on end and not be pumped up about Draft Day. Honestly, I think the draft is bigger than the Super Bowl for me. And I love the Super Bowl. Let's not get it twisted. But I think the draft itself, everything that kind of leads up to it, the weeks and the months that precede it all, and then you've got the actual draft day where now it's spread out over the course of numerous days. So it's like every day you get a little bit more of the pie until you have your total fill. And then after that, you sit back and you're like, all right, this is like Christmas. I opened up all these gifts. Now you kind of go through and you see, all right, well, which one was the best present that we got? Which one? Is there any way we could have got more presents? Could we have maybe traded back and picked up an extra pick here or there and then maybe got something a little bit better? What could we have done different? Is this going to work out? How's this team now look? And you just get super, super excited and super jazzed up. And, dude, I love the NFL draft. It is probably my favorite sporting event.
Unbelievable time, sir. I'm super excited, and let's dive right into it. I think that we're going to be very NFL draft heavy, and we have a guest. If everything works out, we are going to talk to friend of the podcast, Dan Miller. Whenever we need some great insight regarding the NFL or the Detroit Lions, we know who to call, and Dan Miller's always available. So that'll be a fun chat, and we'll be able to give you guys some great insight regarding what the Lions may or may not be thinking with somebody who's in the know, and that's Dan Miller, the voice of the Detroit Lions via the play-by-play platform. But to start off, obviously, many people are looking and saying, okay, what do the Lions need in terms of improving their squad from 2016? Where are the Lions likely going to draft in terms of position, in terms of, which style of play this player is going to present? Is it going to be an athlete, best player available? Who is going to be able to come in right away and help the Detroit Lions? And I think in reading several mock drafts, in the last couple weeks, it's safe to say that the majority of people, and myself included, have started to pinpoint one key position that should be looked at in the first round, and that's the linebacker spot. And I think that that's the spot that the Lions should target at number 21, and trying to find the best athlete there in terms of a linebacker would be ideal. The defense needs to be a focus, and specifically the linebacker position, in my mind, needs to be targeted.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right on. If I was to sit there and tell you going into the season, your starting linebackers consist of Paul Worlow, who was basically a rotational player for Atlanta last year, to Tahir Whitehead and Antonio Williams. What would you tell me? You'd be like, come on, let's be for real.
No, of course not.
Exactly. Thank you. Was that Brian? Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Brian. You're the best. But yeah, no, I mean, you'd look at me like I'm totally crazy. Like, I'm absolutely insane. So yeah, their linebacking core, definitely weak. On top of that, you factor in what you got going on in their defensive line. That's not really a strength of this team either. I mean, Ziggy Ansah was injured most of the year, so you had trouble pressuring the quarterbacks. On top of it, your defensive tackles, as the season wore on, yeah, they kind of got better, and that was because A'Shawn Robinson was brand new to the game. But other than that, I mean, what are we talking about here? They did a decent enough job stuffing the run, but you really didn't get to the quarterback, and that's a huge issue. If Kerry Hyder didn't play out of his mind last year, you'd had hardly any sacks as a team. So I think your front seven is where this team is super weak at, and I think going into this first round, this team's going to have to target somebody who can come in and make a dramatic impact and start day one, either along that defensive line or in that linebacking core.
Now, a name that has kind of shot up the board has been TJ Watt. And many people are thinking, okay, it's a 50-50 chance that this player could also be a person that's drafted. And many people are like, well, he does come from the Watt family. He is somebody that could come in and contribute. But at the same time, you have concern because many people are calling it, in terms of the odds, about 50-50. What are your thoughts about TJ Watt?
I like TJ Watt. This is a guy who's much like his brother, JJ. He's got a motor for days, right? He's always sitting there trying to get at the ball, always lurking around the ball. He's a playmaker. He's a guy who I think you could bring into Detroit, and I think he could start day one and he could make an impact. I think more or less what he is he is a little bit undersized, but he's an athletic guy who just goes, and goes.
And the reason why it's a 50-50 spot is most people don't value him at number 21. So if you delay, he might not be there in the second round. So that's why he's a kind of a challenging spot. But other linebackers have kind of come into the fold. Hassan Reddick is a guy that many people are slotting for the Lions to take at 21, but he might not be available as well. So there are linebackers that the Lions can go out there and acquire if they should choose to want to draft a linebacker at number 21. So you're thinking along the same lines as many that that's probably the pick to go in terms of position, linebacker.
I'm thinking defensive line is the position to go. I wouldn't be upset if they took a linebacker. Again, like I said, your defensive front had a really difficult job getting to the quarterback last year. And I think if you can strengthen that defensive line, what ends up happening is the back four as well as your linebacking core looks much stronger. So if you were to add somebody who could sit there and rush off the edge, you pair them with Ziggy Ansah, you can then rotate them in with Kerry Hyder over the course of the year, because I don't believe you're going to get the same production from Kerry Hyder this upcoming season. Again, he led your team in sacks this prior year. I don't think you're going to get that out of him. And I think if Ziggy Ansah can come back healthy and basically perform like he performed 2 years ago, that mixed in with your draft pick, I think at that point now you're talking about a defensive front that looks like it can make some noise and will put pressure on quarterbacks and create headaches. You got to remember, you're in a division with Aaron Rodgers, one of the best in the game. I don't care about the talent that's around him, and I don't care about his age, and I don't care about the fact that he sat there and just broke up with his beautiful girlfriend. I don't care about any of it. This is still an elite quarterback. So how do you make elite quarterbacks have horrible games? You sit there, you hit them, you put pressure on them, you get at them, and you get after them, down after down after down, and you make their life a living nightmare. So I'm looking at adding somebody along that defensive line. That's where I would go initially. That being said, and I have a mock draft for us, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to it before we can get Dan Miller on or not, but I've got a mock draft here, and there's some guys on here that I'd like to talk to you about, and if they're there, I think the Lions would be in a great spot to pick these guys up, and they would make a dramatic influence day one. Like those guys are going to sit there, they're going to start day one, and they're going to sit there and help out this defense.
No, I think so. I think that defense is the position to go in. There's a lot of names that could be of impact. But to start, I think that many of us, you and I included, are probably really confident that Bob Quinn has a board that is likely going to be professional, and he'll be ready to make adjustments, whether he needs to be aggressive or a little bit more passive. We have faith that at 21, should the Lions stay, I'm thinking I'm more confident than I have been in years past, but I still have this notion because I don't know why there's so much noise surrounding the fact that the Lions may take a tight end. You know, this Miami tight end is a name that keeps sprinkling all across these mock drafts. David Njoku. Yeah, I think that's a name that I would be probably livid if the Lions were to take a tight end in the first round. That's the only position when I looked at it and I said, is there a position I do not want them to draft? It would be the tight end spot, because that would indicate that the pick from the Eric Ebron pick is still having reverberating effects in 2017, and that's horrible. And I understand that it would signify probably the Lions not picking up his option and we'd probably be done with him, but to take a tight end, even though I know it's a big major, you know, many people are talking about tight ends being super, deep in terms of talent. I don't agree with that pick at all, and I don't understand why that name is being sprinkled around so much.
I think it's just kind of a little bit of a smokescreen. You got to remember, too, a lot of these writers and a lot of what they're writing about is stuff that the Lions have put out. And look, if you're the Lions, you're not going to sit there and tell everybody, like, hey, guess what? We're looking for a defensive lineman or a linebacker, because obviously those are two really weak spots on this team. So you're going to sit there and you'll be like, oh, hey, guess what? We're looking at a tight end. We're looking at wide receivers. And you know what? Those would be the two picks that I would absolutely pull my hair out. If they sat there and they went into this draft and they drafted a wide receiver early and they drafted a tight end in the first round, I would absolutely pull my hair out. And if they drafted a tight end in the second round, I'd probably pull my hair out as well. Those are two positions I don't think you need to address early in this draft. If I'm sitting there looking to try to put the absolute best draft together to really help this team, what I'm doing is in the first round, it's either going to be a defensive lineman or a linebacker. Whichever player that is the best available in either one of those positions, that's what I'm going for. If you come back in the second round and you draft a guy like a Joe Mixon, I'm okay with that. You get your running back for the future. Now, by all accounts, Joe Mixon is the most pro-ready running back in this draft. He's a guy who can come in and make an immediate impact. Yes, he's got baggage, and yes, he has off-the-field issues. And those are things to sit there and look at and discuss, and you're going to have to do your due diligence if you're Bob Quinn before you sit there and you go on and you submit that card to get that player. But I wouldn't be upset if they sat there and they drafted Joe Mixon with the second pick. I would then come back either with my third pick, or I would sit there and somehow try to move back up into the second round to then either again address the defensive line or the linebacking position, whichever one I did not address with my first pick. And then after that, and with my fourth pick, I would sit there and I'd look at trying to get if Jake Butt's there, I would sit there and I'd take a flyer on Jake Butt. I think he is a player who can make a difference. Now, Jake Butt was a guy who was discussed, and there was a lot of talk going into the Citrus Bowl that he would sit there, or the Orange Bowl. There was a lot of talk about him possibly being a first-round talent, a guy who could sit there and make a difference for somebody playing on the offensive side of the ball. He was that gifted and talented where he could catch most passes. He was a decent blocker. He was a smart player. He sat there, he had that really catastrophic knee injury, tore his ACL. And with the advancements in medicine, and you've seen it with Adrian Peterson has basically blown out both his knees, and the guy is still sitting there trucking along. So I think if you can come back sometime either late in the third round or early in the fourth round, you pick up a guy like a Jake Butt. So now you've got your running back, you've got your tight end, and you've addressed your defensive line as well as your linebacking positions. Now I think you now have 4 players with your first 4 picks who can all make an immediate impact on the field. I think that right there is a great start to your draft. After that, I'm going to be looking to add safeties, corners, adding some depth along that D-line, adding some depth in my linebacking core, and at some point I'm going to have to take a wide receiver. So those are all positions that this team needs. This team has a ton of holes on it still. But what you can do with your first 4 picks is you can make an immediate impact by doing something similar to what I just said. You know, if you go out and with pick number 21, you draft a guy like a Taco Charlton, or if he falls to a Reuben Foster, that's great. That's awesome. Or even a guy like a Jared Davis out of Florida. There's your linebacker. There's your edge. There's whatever you want to sit there and address that front 7. You've now done it with your first pick. Come back your second round, get your running back, because I don't believe Amir Abdullah is worth a damn. Washington, I don't know about. Zach Zenner, nice complimentary piece, but come on, is that a guy who's going to be able to sit there and carry the ball for you all the time? No. And what is Theo Riddick? Theo Riddick's always banged up, always hurt. He's a third down specialty kind of guy. That's what you got. You don't have an actual running back who's going to be able to do anything for you.
So if they do go offense first round or second round, what position do you think is of the most need to improve this team? Running back?
If you're going,
or wide receiver.
If you're going to go offense, it would be probably a running back, especially that high in the second round. I think wide receiver you can get later on in the draft. You might be able to get somebody even undrafted who can come in and make an immediate impact. That's what good teams do. That's what real good teams do. They sit there, they go out, they grab guys who are undrafted, and they just plug them in, and they produce for you. So, and I think this is one of the only times I can say that I'm 100% confident in the guy making the calls and pulling the strings. I'm confident in Bob Quinn. It seems like he knows what the hell he's talking about. You know, if you look at his draft last year, all those guys ended up helping out at some point or another, you know? And if you look and you project them to this year, they're either going to be starters or they're going to be second on the depth chart, so they will be getting some playing time. So I like what Bob Quinn's doing. And last year, and in this offseason, Bob Quinn's mantra was to address the offensive line, win in the trenches. So I think in this draft, what he's going to do is he's going to flip that, and he's going to sit there and address the defensive line. He's going to address the linebacking core. You can best believe he's going to sit there and he's going to make this front 7 of this defense much better, much angrier, much faster, and it's going to cause nightmares for quarterbacks for years to come.
All right, let's look at some of the guys that have not had the best pre-draft press in the last few weeks. So Reuben Foster, first guy, obviously didn't do well at the Combine. He's a guy that's slipping a little bit. Do you think he'll be there at 21? And if so, do you take a chance on him?
If Reuben Foster's there at 21, absolutely. I'm running that card up to the podium, and I'm saying, I got it. Because that guy right there, he can start day one. He can make an immediate impact. Absolutely. Now, does he have baggage? Yes, he does. Did he sit there and did he cause a little bit of an incident at the Combine? Sure did. Did he have a diluted urine sample? Yep, bet your bottom dollar he did. So do I think those issues are big red flags? Not in one-off instances, but you sit there, you start to compile them, there might be a little bit of a character flaw here. So, look, Bob Quinn, guy who does his due diligence, right? He's already sat down and talked to Reuben Foster. I think he has a pretty good grasp on where his head's at and what's going on with these situations. So I would not be shocked or startled if Reuben Foster was picked up by the Lions.
Another player that's local, has local ties, and many people are bantering regarding what happened. So Jabril Peppers obviously had a diluted sample when he went to the combine. And so his team got ahead of it. His crew over there at CAA kind of put out a statement and said, look, he was under the weather and he had to hydrate, so he was very worried regarding the fact that he was going to work out first, and he was really concerned, so he definitely hydrated and things like that. And many people are wondering, going, well, can you drink an excessive amount of water and cause that to trigger a diluted sample? Most experts say no, that there is a certain set of markers that are indicated that will trigger off a diluted sample. And when you look at it, many people will say,
really?
And are you trying to lie? Are you trying to hide something? Is there something that you were taking that maybe potentially you don't want other teams to know about? And I look at it and I go, okay, there aren't that many samples that come back diluted every single year. And I say to myself, is it a big deal? Not particularly. I don't really care, because I think in the coming years, throughout the course of this podcast, we've talked about the liberal nature of the attitude of marijuana in the country in terms of the NFL and what it really could do for athletes. But in the end, the part that's a little bit more concerning is this player, Jabril Peppers, a person that could cause problems if he gets drafted? Could he be a guy that, in terms of his character, might do something and try to cover it up? Is he forthright? Is he open and honest? Because it seems like the attitude of people that received that message was, listen, we know you're fronting, we know you're probably lying, don't run that by us because we don't believe it. And so for that leads me to go, well, that is a little bit of a character flaw. But for me, I don't think there's any chance at number 21, if he's there, the Lions take him talent-wise. We can talk about and dissect his personality and what do you think about this whole diluted sample bullshit. But for me, I say talent-wise, at number 21, there are much more talented players. And even so, many more people are thinking his teammate is a guy at 21 that could end up being drafted, and that's Taco Charlton.
Let me play devil's advocate for you here, okay? Now, Jabril Peppers was tested the day before he worked out, okay? Mind you, Jabril Peppers was the only player who sat there and worked out with one set of guys and then worked out with another set of guys the following day. Jabril Peppers said he was feeling a little bit underneath the weather. He was sitting there, he overhydrated. When I go to the doctors, they make me do a urine sample, all right? It's not testing for drugs or anything like that. It's checking for different metabolic things because I'm diabetic. There have been times where my doctor has come back and said, you've been drinking a lot of water today? And I said, yeah, generally I drink at least a gallon of water a day, if not more. She's like, all right, well, your urine sample is diluted. Can you go and pee again? And then I'll sit there and be like, I'll see what I can squeeze out for you, but no guarantees. So it makes this sounds plausible to me that, yes, he sat there, he knew he was prepping for basically 2 days worth of combine activities. He sat there, he was overhydrating because he was feeling a little underneath the weather, and he didn't want to sit there and be dehydrated while he was going through. If you remember, he sat there and he worked out first with the linebackers, and then he came back the second day and worked out with the cornerbacks. You're going to work out with the linebackers. That's pretty grueling because you're doing all the linebacker activities, which are based more upon power. Then you're going to follow that up the second day with basically speed drills. So you're going to sit there and you're going to want to hydrate yourself. And if you're not feeling well, I think that's more of an excuse here, but
you're not too upset with what this news came out.
No, it stands to reason to me that, yes, he probably sat there and he provided a diluted sample because he overhydrated. And here's the thing. His diluted sample didn't test for any markers with anything. It was just too much water in his urine. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about dudes in their underwear and their urine. This is where we're at. So, it doesn't raise an eyebrow to me. It doesn't make me think any less of the player. Now, this is what could happen for your Detroit Lions, all right? At 21, do I think they'll take Jabril Peppers? No, absolutely not. There are too many needs. Like you said, if Taco Charlton's there, I'm taking Taco Charlton because he provides me what I need along my defensive line. Now, your Lions, what they could do is they could trade back in the draft, okay? You figured they drop back to, 30, 31, and they sit there and they get an extra, I don't know, third round pick. They can later on pair that, move back up into the second round. Here, there, wherever, okay? That's what they could do. They end up moving back. Jabril Peppers is sitting there. He is a guy who looks like he can sit there and help you out in your back four. He could play safety for you. He's a guy who can also help you in your return game. I could see them taking him if they are sitting there picking in the later half of the draft or the final 3 picks of the first round. I could see Jabril Peppers then possibly going to your Lions, but that's only if they're able to sit there and move back and get an extra third round pick or whatever it would be.
Understood. I really do believe it. I'm so excited because I think this year will be a year when we look at who the Lions draft is going to be a guy that, okay, it could be, Davis, it could be a linebacker, it could be a defensive end, it could be Taco Charlton. Most people don't believe that the Lions are going to trade or move up or down or anything like that. It could happen. It's just that we all know about the New England philosophy and that we could trade back because there's so much depth. So there is more of a chance than in years past that the Lions trade up, but if they're there at 21, my guy, locked down, I've said it before, and I think I've locked it down, and it's going to be Jarrad Davis. I think he fits all the criteria of what's needed. My only concern is that he did sit out 2014 with a knee problem, and with the Lions, I know they haven't had success in the past with guys that have had lingering issues. They sometimes tend to flare up more with the Detroit Lions than other teams, but many people are, and friend of the podcast, Neil Rule, we were texting before the show, and he said, look, I'm going to make a bold prediction. He said, go ahead, air it, no problem. He said, because I messaged him, with a sarcastic flair like I always tend to do, and I'm like, okay, over under 3 years before his next surgery. And Neil texts back, he's like, I'll make a bold prediction that he'll make a Pro Bowl before his next surgery.
Jarrad Davis will?
Jarrad Davis, linebacker.
Oh.
So Neil Rule's high on him, and I've kind of, watched this film and said, look, in terms of what a linebacker needs to be able to do in his talent set, kind of fits with the Lions. It's always, though, there's never a perfect player where you go, boom, lock it down, go get him right away. We have to go get him. There's always something that is of a concern, and that's that knee. But if he's there and he's taken, I think I'll be happy. And a lot of people in our article that's going to come out later on today on DetroitSportsPodcast.com will list several of the picks that friends of the podcast believe the Lions will take at number 21. And many people, I think the leader in the clubhouse is Jarrad Davis, linebacker, Florida.
And here's the thing. With this draft, this year, this draft is loaded with defense, whether it be somebody along your defensive line, your linebacker, even in your secondary. So don't be surprised if the Lions sit there and they take your guy at linebacker, and then they're able to sit there and follow it up and make an impact pick in the second, third, fourth, fifth round, either along the defensive line or in that secondary. I expect them to sit there and draft players. At least 2 out of 4 players will make an immediate impact on one of those levels on the defense, and then I think you'll get some secondary guys to sit there and fill in, whether it be a role player for the linebacking core and a role player for the secondary, or it'll be, flip-flop it any way you want. Look, this draft is loaded with defense, and I think Bob Quinn's going into it knowing that it's loaded with defense, and he's going to be looking to pick up guys to sit there and help this defense out.
So number 21, who's the name? Give me a name.
If he's there, Taco Charlton.
Okay, that's the guy that Adam thinks. That's a guy now that many people also think as well the Lions will take. Okay, we'll take our first time out here. We'll come right back after the break and talk to Dan Miller, Fox 2 Sports, Detroit Lions play-by-play voice. Doc here, I want to tell you about our host site, Podomatic. Since Adam and I started this project in September of 2013, we've only utilized one host site, and that's Podomatic. If you're looking to start up a brand new podcast and you're wondering, how the heck do I take my audio, either from my basement or my studio or anything that I record? How do I get it up to the internet? Well, go check out Podomatic.com. That's Podomatic.com. They have a very user-friendly interface, and it allows you to put up your audio to the interwebs rather quickly. And that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful in that we've had relatively no problems dealing with Podomatic. We've uploaded almost 500-600 podcasts through Podomatic, and they've been a great host site. We get our stuff up to the internet, up to iTunes. They work with us. And if you have any problems at all, their customer service department is unbelievable. They've been nothing but great for us, and that's why we're happy to support Podomatic.com.
right, and welcome back. Joining us right now is, we tell him this all the time, but he is the best in the business. It's your play-by-play voice of your Detroit Lions. He's also the director of sports at WJBK, that's Fox 2 in the Detroit area. What's going on, Dan?
How you doing, guys? Appreciate the kind words. Good to be with you as always.
Well, hey, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. And look, Lions draft day is here. This is my favorite time of the year. It's John's favorite time of the year. If you're a Lions fan, this is basically like Christmas morning. You're waking up and you're unwrapping all your gifts, and you're sitting there. You're super excited because you got your Hot Wheels racetrack. So I guess we're just going to kind of cut right to it. What do you believe the Lions' needs are entering this draft?
Well, I think they have a lot of needs, and I think it's a matter of prioritizing those and then seeing what the board presents. I mean, I think really outside of offensive line, quarterback, kicker, punter, you can make a case that they have a need on the defensive line. They have a need at cornerback. They have a need at linebacker and safety, need a wide receiver. They're still kind of kept everybody in the dark in terms of what their decision is on Eric Ebron. So in their eyes, they might need a tight end. So I think that, it's wide open, and it's going to be a case of value kind of, intersecting with need when it comes up to them at 21, which is a long way of saying I think there's a lot of possibilities for them at that position. We can kind of hone it down based on whom we think is going to be there, but the dangerous thing at that point is you're always, number one, guessing who's going to be there. Number two, you're also guessing which player you think they like.
Now, going into the first round of this draft, how are you thinking the Lions are going to approach this? And I think everybody can agree that defense is a huge need, and it looks like the way Bob Quinn's building this team is he's doing it through the trenches. So how do you think the Lions approach this draft? And more specifically, do they go defense? And if so, how do they approach that?
Well, I think he's built it from the trenches because he had to build it from the trenches. I mean, the offensive line, they absolutely had to rebuild that thing, and he's certainly done that. And the defensive line, he was walking into a situation with a team that, been dominant in 2014, and in particular in the middle, and those guys were gone. So he needed to start to figure some things out to build it around Ziggy and try to figure out what he had to work with. So, I absolutely agree that the board, in terms of their depth chart, would indicate defense, but I'm still not absolutely sold that if an offensive player falls down, that they're intrigued by at that point, that they wouldn't look at him. Just because I think sometimes people get so carried away and they think, oh my God, you didn't draft the absolute need that you had in round one. Well, there's 6 more rounds, and there's the possibility of making trades later, and there's still, leftovers from the free agent market that I think are out there that will ultimately help people win games this year. They just haven't found their market yet, and they probably will after the draft, which is a long way of saying I think it's defense. We'll have to wait and see. But I think that, you're trying to figure out what 20 teams in front of you are going to do, and then what's going to be left on the board. So I think, their hard work is done. Their board is set in Allen Park. They'll have a group of 2 or 3 guys that they're looking at probably when they get to 21. Maybe it's an easy pick and somebody's there that they had projected much higher. Maybe it's something that there has to be a little bit of discussion on. But as Bob Quinn has said many times, most of those discussions are already hashed out long before you get to that night.
And Dan, I think Bob Quinn has come out and said when he was asked earlier in last week, when he was asked about kind of his overall draft philosophy, he kind of came out and said, I lean towards more drafting guys that are considered best available as opposed to drafting need. Do you think that is a fair philosophy?
I do, but he also had a kind of a caveat on that, and he said that needs also come into play there. So I think that certainly you want to get the best talent you can because you're ultimately adding to your depth and you're adding to your roster, and you don't want to really, jump off your board and draft somebody that you had at 32 because they're the best, just for example, defensive end, and you need a defensive end and you're drafted at 21. I just don't think that makes sense. I think you still have to again, hope that in the best case scenario, your need and your board intersect. And then I think you have to look at it and just try to find the best value that you can. And if that value meets need, that's fantastic, but you can't force it. I think that's where you get into trouble. When teams say, we have to have a middle linebacker, that's when I think you run into some problems. And, I think, we've seen examples of that in the past. I think, you throw out a guy like Jordan Dizon or Brian Calhoun, guys that, the Lions felt like they needed a running back or felt like they needed a linebacker, and they forced those picks a little bit, and we saw what happened. So, I think Bob Quinn's patient. I don't think Bob Quinn's going to force anything. I think he's probably going to stick pretty close to his board. But what that'll end up being remains to be seen. We can all say it should definitely be a linebacker or it should definitely be a defensive end because those two positions appear to be their most significant needs. But I'm telling you, if he doesn't have one of those guys rated, close to that position, and there's another position that's higher, I'd say outside of offensive line, quarterback, punter, kicker, I'm not going to be surprised at anything he does at that point.
And speaking of the linebackers, let's look at that position specifically. There's a couple names out there in the first round that we've looked at in several mock drafts that could be of benefit for the Detroit Lions. What do you make of the current linebacker class, and which one do you think would fit very well with the Detroit Lions scheme?
Look, I think Foster is a guy that if he's going to drop like people say that he is, he's somebody that you have to think about, but there's all sorts of red flags there from off the field stuff to physical stuff that you're going to have to hash through with your medical people and then your study of his background. I think he's clearly a top 10 talent that people are now indicating is going to fall. Now, is he? I have no idea. Everybody's talking at this point, and most people are lying. So you have to wait and see, but he's somebody that would clearly, in that linebacker class, make you think about what the possibilities are. Hassan Reddick is somebody else with the athleticism that he brings. A little bit of hesitancy in that you're asking him to change positions, but if you're comfortable with that, he seems to bring the intangibles with him that you're looking for. And then Gerard Davis is another guy that I think that you have to think about. Everything, about him off the field and leadership and things like that. He seems to check every box there, very athletic, but again, has had some injury problems that you have to get comfortable with your medical people. To me, I think those are probably the three linebackers that seem to be mentioned the most that for one reason or another could be there when they pick at 21.
On the phone with us right now is Dan Miller, the voice of the Lions play-by-play, also the director of sports at Fox 2. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan Miller Fox 2. Now, Dan, I want to get your opinion on a couple of different players, and just maybe in how they would relate. You've already kind of touched on Reuben Foster, but basically these are guys who have red flags and have troubled issues. So what are your thoughts on a guy like a Joe Mixon and the Lions possibly drafting him?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, they have a lot more information than we do because they have done extensive background, research on him with everything, I'm sure, from law enforcement to, most of the people that he's known in his life. I mean, it's that thorough that teams go through because they're investing so much money and putting their brand on this young man to have him represent them. So I don't claim to have all the facts about Joe Mixon. Let me say this. If you're going to draft a Joe Mixon, number one, there has to be unanimity throughout your organization that you're okay with it. And I believe that goes all the way up to Mrs. Ford. You're not drafting him unless you have explained to her and her family and the leadership in the Ford family what the possible ramifications and criticisms are going to be for drafting a kid like that. And it wouldn't surprise me that ultimately, if they do end up drafting him, that she's spoken to him. I mean, I really believe it goes that high that she's going to be very involved in a pick like that. I think if you're going to draft a Joe Mixon, you need to have a plan. Number one, you need to know what has he done to this point to rectify whatever was wrong with him that caused him to commit that awful act, and anything else that he's done in his past that has raised a red flag. And then I think that you have to have a plan going forward. What's his support system going to be? How are you going to handle all the questions about this? If it's me, you're going to be peppered with questions about that. You better have your answers ready, and they better be good. And then I think that for him, you put him out there once or twice to answer questions, and then you say, you know what, guys, that's it. We're moving forward. This young man is trying to get his life together, personally and professionally, and the days of talking about that are over. Days for atoning for that are not. Days for supporting him psychologically and moving forward and making sure that he's in the right frame of mind to handle everything around him are not. But I wouldn't bring him in there and have him every time he's surrounded by reporters to answer questions about it. I'd do it once or twice, then that would be it. But it's all my way of saying that you need to have a full plan if you draft somebody like that to handle all of the things that come with it. Terrific talent. I mean, terrific football player, but obviously a ton of baggage that you're going to have to deal with.
And what about a local guy, Jabril Peppers? Now, he had a diluted urine sample at the Combine. There are now some questions about whether or not he's I don't know if it's liable or responsible to his teammates, as some personalities are calling him out for not playing in the Orange Bowl. So what are your thoughts on a guy like a Jabril Peppers and the Lions?
Yeah, again, I would say this. They have a lot more information than we do, and I don't mean to use that as a cop-out. I do mean to use that as the extent, the research they do on these guys is pretty incredible and extensive. So I think they would have a handle for any other tests he may have failed, of which his people says there are none, and perhaps there are. I'm not saying there are. I don't know that. But if there's been any other sort of infractions that he has, if this is about somebody smoking pot or somebody like that, and he's trying to hide it, and that's an if, because I don't know. But if that's what this comes down to, Martin Mayhew said it a while back, if you're going to take everybody off your board that has smoked pot at some point, you have a very small board. And I think the thing that would trouble you is, if that's in fact the case, look, you knew that this test was coming. And if this was anything more than him drinking 8 to 10 glasses or bottles of water because he was sick, if this was him trying to mask something, that worries you, because at that point you got to ask, what kind of self-control does somebody have if they know for a fact that a drug test is coming and they've still done something to put themselves, in a position where they can be compromised because of a positive test? So those are the kind of questions that I would have to ask. I don't think this is going to affect Jabril very much. I think he's still going to go in the first round. I think he's still going to be, highly sought after by some teams. Where does he go? I don't know. I talked about having a plan off the field for somebody like Mixon. You need to have a plan on the field for somebody like Jabril, because he is a unique talent that you're going to have to find ways to use and define his position that fits your defense. But I've not heard anything about Jabril Peppers that raises huge red flags for me that I am overly worried about him or bringing him into my locker room based on what I've heard.
Now, are you in agreement with several analysts that this is a very deep tight end class, and do you see the Lions potentially addressing it early in the draft, or would they be better served to address the tight end spot if they're looking in that direction later on?
I'd be surprised if, I don't think O.J. Howard's sitting there at 21. He'd be the guy that seems to be the most complete player that I might think about if I really needed to go in that position. I don't see them going tight end early. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think that much of it might come down to what their feelings are about Eric Ebron. That option sitting out there that they have until May 2nd to exercise that. And I think that, that obviously decision has to come down in the next, couple of days. If they're comfortable with him, they've got him locked up for 2 more years. If they're not, they've got him for 1 more year, and then they can figure things out. But it does seem to be a talented tight end class, and maybe that's something they can address down the line. I've been a little surprised at all the mocks that have had them taking a tight end in the first round. And again, on draft night, I'm not going to be shocked by anything, but my gut is that that's probably not a direction they go unless somebody like O.J. Howard really falls all the way down there and they're just intrigued by him, who appears to be a complete 3-down tight end.
All right, Dan, so before we brought you on the show, you were kind of recounting a story with us about what you were doing before you came on here, and you were making your runs on Radio Row here. So can you sit there and fill our audience in on what you were doing this afternoon before you came on with us? And it sounded like you were doing a mock draft and who you selected.
Yeah, a lot of these radio stations do these mock drafts where they will bring on a media member from each of the cities and have them place a pick for the team. And I was doing it for Jacksonville right before I came on with you guys. And by the time I came on, Foster was gone, Reddick was gone, Gerard Davis was gone, Tack McKinley was gone. So there were a lot of guys that I would have been interested in that were gone. I ended up taking Charles Harris out of Missouri. Just seemed to be the highest rated position and need player that was left. Taco Charlton was there as well. Here's what I don't know, guys. I have no idea how the Lions compare Taco Charlton to Charles Harris. Harris seems to be rated higher in most of the things that I've seen, but that's where you start kind of walking through the dark there and trying to figure out what they're thinking. And I'll tell you a story, and I'll leave the names out. But, it was a couple of years ago now, back when Jim Schwartz was the head coach. And the Lions had picked in the first round, and part of what Brandy and I did was we had to interview him before he went and met with the media. So we interviewed him, and we talked about the pick, and then we asked him about a player that had been mocked to the Lions over and over and over and over. And he just kind of looked at us and goes, we didn't like him. We didn't think he could play. And it just kind of, at that point, the light just kind of comes on that we think we know, but we don't know. And I mean, this was a guy that had been mocked to the Lions so many times that you would have thought they loved him, and you would have assumed they loved him. And yet he was on the board when they picked, and we were being told, nope, didn't like him, didn't fit what we did, and we didn't like the tape. And it's just like, okay, it's just like, that's where you start to guess. You can tell me who's still on the board at 21, and I can tell you what my research, which for the most part comes down to reading scouting reports and seeing what other people think about players and then trying to assimilate something from that. But you're really guessing at that point. But that's what I ended up doing. I took Harris, hoping that he could kind of fill that other side on the other side of Ziggy and get them some pressure from that side.
We all absolutely know nothing. It's just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping something sticks.
Yeah, I mean, it's as long as we know that and we're just kind of blowing smoke and having fun with it, that's okay. I mean, and that's what this is all about. And it's still fun, but when all is said and done, look, most of these mock drafts that are out there, how many do they get right? 7, 8, something like that out of 32?
I don't know. Mel Kiper does like 900 of them leading up to the draft, and he's usually wrong on everything. So maybe not everything, and that's not a knock on Mel. He works really hard. Right. He knows a lot about this stuff. But when you're trying to assess how a team feels about him and how a team thinks he fits into their scheme or what they do, it becomes really difficult.
Hand DSP the envelope with one name on it. Who do the Lions draft? Number 21. Give it to us.
I've been saying Gerard Davis, so I'm going to stick with that. I just think he seems to check all the boxes: athleticism, good tackler, athletic, terrific type of leader that I think would be good for your team and grow into that kind of role in a linebacker position. It's a significant position of need for them. I've kind of said Davis and Davis, and I've said Gerard Davis, if he's there, would be my guy. And just as the dark horse, I think if a player like a Corey Davis falls down the board because people are freaked by his ankle or the fact that he hasn't run a 40, I think that's something you got to think about, because that too is a position of need, and you're not just drafting for, the second weekend in September next year. You're drafting for the next 5 to 7 years, and I think that kid's going to be a special player. And I think that's kind of an example, I think, of an offensive player that if he's sitting there would give them reason to think. Do I know how much they like Corey Davis? I have no idea. But I'm just saying that board might dictate that if somebody's still sitting there that they had ranked higher, it's something they think about. But I've been saying Gerard Davis for a little while now, and then after coming off the taco train, and I think that I'll stick with him at this point as my best guess for what's out there.
Dan Miller, kind enough to give us a few minutes talking NFL draft. We always enjoy the conversation. Now, we'll get you out of here on this. I read somewhere where the NFL Network is likely to have cameras in 20 cities, their team's draft war rooms. As a guy in TV, do you think that that's something that's very entertaining for the viewer? And is there another avenue or anything else that you'd like to see more in terms of television coverage as a viewer to potentially make the draft even more exciting? I like the idea of having cameras in the draft war room, but it does also lead to some speculation and some amateur psychology when we see some of the general managers making their decisions.
Well, yeah, but keep this in mind. Those things are incredibly sanitized. You're not seeing, if you see something that gives you an idea of what a team is doing, you let me know. Because when those teams agree to have those cameras put in their draft rooms, it is with the understanding that you are showing nothing of substance other than them walking around and giving high fives. And maybe somebody with his glasses down on the tip of his nose looking at a piece of paper, but you're not getting much. I mean, what would I like? Hell, I'd love to have microphones sitting there where you could hear these guys talking about it and, hashing out any decisions that they have to make. But look, I think it's cool. I think it's something different. This is a long process. It gives you a look into their reactions when they pick somebody. But, fact is, and if you're in this business, you've experienced, trying to do things like that. When you're given access like that, as these cameras are, it is with the understanding that you're not giving away anything that is team business or anything like that. It's mostly just congratulations, high fives, calling somebody and saying, hey, congratulations, you're a Detroit Lion. But is it worth it? Absolutely. I think it adds something to it.
Dan, thank you so much for the time. We look forward to talking with you in the future, especially around the time of preseason. Best of luck. And if you're looking for great draft coverage, definitely look to Fox 2 Sports, led by Dan Miller. Always a class act and a guy that I always look forward to texting and having some fun chats with. Thank you so much, Dan, for your time.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Take it easy, Dan. Thank you.
Wow, man, that was fun. When you talk about the draft and you have a guy like Dan Miller calling you up and having a conversation about kind of a little bit of some inside information regarding what he thinks about his thoughts about the draft or the television side of things, always great stuff and a great story there with Jim Schwartz. And that we all know that's why it's so popular, because there is value to not knowing. Because if everybody just knew, if you had that one guy that's just like you always knew when you go to him that he gets it down all the time, then it doesn't make it fun for guys like us, guys like Jason, guys like you know, to put out mock drafts, because it is fun and I love it. And I love the fact that we don't exactly know, and I love the fact that general managers sometimes lie to shoot out information as smokescreen. It's the ultimate game of cat and mouse and the ultimate game of chess. So great conversation with Dan Miller, and it's good that he thinks along the lines of the doc, and Jared Davis is the guy.
Linebacker. You know what? Dan's great. Dan's he's so much fun to talk to because he's a wealth of knowledge. He knows the Lions inside and out. He sits in, and he'll be the first one to tell you, like, look, guys, I don't know everything there is to know, but I know enough, and I'm going to give you what I got, and I'm going to be straight up with you. And he pulls no punches. He tells you how it is. And telling you how it is, I've got a bonus mock draft. Would you like to discuss this? Because I think this leads to some very interesting topics and something for us to kind of pull out here.
Sure, no doubt. Who is it from?
All right, this is from Doug Faris of the Bleacher Report. So we'll just kind of start with pick 1, and I'll give you some highlights as we work our way down to 21, and we'll just kind of go from there. And after I give you the Lions pick, that's when we can really start to hash things out and really discuss some interesting topics here. All right, so with the first pick, the Cleveland Browns, no surprise here, they take Myles Garrett, edge rusher from Texas A&M. San Francisco takes Jamal Adams, safety out of LSU. The Chicago Bears take Solomon Thomas, D lineman out of Stanford. The Jacksonville Jaguars take the first quarterback off the board with Mitch Trubisky from North Carolina. The Jets then take Deshaun Watson, the second quarterback, off the board. Carolina Panthers then take Leonard Fournette, the first running back, off the board, followed by the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals take Christian McCaffrey, so the second running back off the board, might be the most complete running back on this draft board here. The Cleveland Browns, with their 12th pick, they come back and they take Patrick Mahomes, quarterback out of Texas Tech. Now, within the first 12 picks, we have 3 quarterbacks gone. All right, if you're the Lions, that's probably the best case scenario. That means quarterbacks are going fast and early. Philadelphia Eagles now follow that up with Derek Barnett, edge rusher out of Tennessee, somebody who's been linked with the Lions. The Indianapolis Colts take Corey Davis, wide receiver out of Western Michigan. Washington takes Malik McDowell, D lineman out of Michigan State. The Tennessee Titans take Hassan Reddick, linebacker, edge rusher out of Temple. He's another guy that most Lions fans are salivating over. Now the Tampa Bay Bucks come in and they take Dalvin Cook, running back out of Florida State. Now this is where things start to get a little bit interesting because now the Lions are on the clock. And some names that are still available for the Lions. Reuben Foster, Kevin King, Charles Harris. You heard Dan talk about that. Chidobe Awuzie. He's a cornerback out of Colorado, supposed to be an impact player. Also, Jared Davis, your guy, linebacker from Florida. Taco Charlton's still out there. In this mock draft, the Detroit Lions take O.J. Howard, tight end out of Alabama.
Oh, my God.
Exactly, Brian. Exactly. Now, here's the deal.
No.
All right?
No.
The one thing I can say definitively, going into next season, right? Your tight end position and your tight end with Eric Ebron is much better than your linebacking core the way it currently stands. All right? So if Reuben Foster is there, I'm taking Reuben Foster, okay? If Reuben Foster's not there, Charles Harris, Jared Davis, there's another linebacker for you. You can even take Kevin King, and I would understand that because now you're looking at shoring up that defense. You cannot go O.J. Howard. You cannot go O.J. Howard.
No way.
Doesn't make sense to me why you'd go O.J. Now, look, I understand. He's probably the most complete tight end in this draft. He looks like he could basically be the second coming of Gronk with a good back. I get it. I understand it. But you can't take a tight end. You can't. You have too many holes on the defense.
You know, I want to tell all the mock drafts that had a tight end.
Fuck you, man.
I'm not interested. Whenever I see the TE, I'm just like, forget it, man. No way.
Fuck you, man.
It's like, forget it. I'm not interested in reading that. I can't handle it. I just can't take stuff like that, reading for the tight end, because it's just, I know we could package Eric Ebron. I know that we could get rid of him or not pick up his option, but
what are you going to package him with? And for? What are you going to get?
Miraculously, package, Laken Tomlinson, Eric Ebron, and get like a 3rd-round pick.
Right. What does that say? That's 2 first-round draft picks in consecutive years that you just gave up for 1 third-round pick. That's horrible drafting by you as the Lions. It's brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah, man. So good stuff there. Listen, in essence, when we look at it, I just got a strong feeling it's going to be defense. They cannot, the offense is pretty good. Obviously, there's going to be a need at wide receiver, but in a deep draft, you can get those positions later on. So, when the name's called tonight at number 21, I got a good feeling Roger Goodell is going to come out there and he's going to say, listen, it's going to be a defensive player and likely going to be a combination of either Hassan Reddick or Jared Davis. Those are probably the 2 names that I think are probably 60 to 70% the guys that the Lions are likely to take if they stay at number 21. I can't wait for tonight.
I would say Taco Charlton, Gerard Davis, maybe Charles Harris. Depends on what happens. You know what? Reuben Foster's tumbling down this draft board everywhere you go. And it could be a little bit of a smokescreen. But you know what? If Reuben Foster's there at 21, I'm taking him. He's my dude. That's the guy I'm taking. And I'll deal with all the issues. I'll deal with all of them. And we'll sit there, we'll put him in a buddy program, a big brother, big sister program, and we'll have somebody sit there and hold his hand through life. As long as he can sit there and make tackles and force fumbles and just annihilate people, I'm cool with it.
All right, cuz, let's transition to the Doc and Jock Wrestling Report. As thrilled as I was when the superstar shakeup occurred is how devastatingly disappointed I am with the same level of veracity this week in terms of the shows that were put on. I really feel like the schedule came up in terms of, late April, and they had this stuff to put out, and they just kind of went with it. Raw was, in terms of how I graded it, an F.
It was abysmal.
It was horrible. SmackDown really wasn't that much better, although there were moments that we can definitely talk about and share laughs with. But I think the highlight of the week for me, in terms of both shows, was Jinder Mahal got a crew. That was awesome to see the Singh brothers and to be like, hey now, the Singh brothers doing their thing to help out Jinder Mahal. But
the Bollywood boys, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's who it is.
But at the same time, though, the bit of stealing the champ's belt is old and played out.
I thought that was great.
I would have liked Jinder Mahal to plow or pick up Randy Orton and pile drive him through, the table or do some cool move to kind of establish himself as the guy. But just stealing his belt and doing his, corny gestures isn't really moving it along. But it is nice to see that maybe, just maybe, there is a chance that the next WWE champion could be Jinder Mahal. And that storyline moving along is interesting to me. But overall, to start with Raw, I thought it was really a sad kind of way to push a pay-per-view. It didn't move anything along, and it's a sad way where you, in essence, you highlighted Braun Strowman, and the rest of the card, the rest of the matches, didn't do a whole heck of a lot to move storylines, and it just felt like it was a night where you kind of took it off, and everyone kind of just showed up to kind of half-ass it.
This is a go-home show. This is the show that's supposed to get you pumped up for the upcoming pay-per-view.
I'm not buying because of that.
No, it was absolutely atrocious. If anything, I don't want to buy this pay-per-view at all. I want you to give me some money to watch this crap. I don't want to give you money to watch it. It was absolutely horrible. On top of it, you've got a guy, you've got your monster, you've got your freak, you've got your guy who has killed the face of Raw, right? With Braun Strowman going up against Kalisto in a garbage can match. All right? It was a dumpster match. Basically, you fall in the dumpster, you lose. That's what this is supposed to be. Braun Strowman loses to Kalisto? Are you serious? This is the equivalent of me going up against your youngest daughter. Okay? Size, everything, right? I should be able to pick your kid up by her head, and if I wanted to, I could slam her into a trash can. I wouldn't do that because I love her and she's cute. But here's the deal. That's what it's supposed to be. Instead, you have Strowman lose this match. On top of that, Bray Wyatt comes out and does Sister Abigail to everybody at the very end when you have two baby faces beating up on one heel.
No.
It's so stupid. Just horrible, lazy booking all the way around. The most entertaining part about this show was Jericho coming out and doing his last little show here.
The highlight reel?
Yes, the highlight reel. And then you have The Miz come out and try to do some Miz TV. And then you have Dean Ambrose come out and a whole bunch of geeks come out and they basically tear down the set again. And Ambrose does the Ambrose Asylum. And the next thing you know, Dean Ambrose is giving a gift to Jericho. Jericho pops a great one-liner in there about how this gift is much better than the last time he got a gift, and he pulls out this awful just suit coat with Christmas lights strung through it. And I thought that was absolutely great. I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. That was the best part of this entire show.
Yeah.
That was the best part. And that bit right there drug on forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
And the show never recovered. And I think that's why when you look at it, it seemed like when you had the superstar shakeup, you could involve, some of the talent a little bit better and utilize them to highlight them. But to go and put on a show like that, I feel bad for the fans of Kansas City to witness that, because it just didn't seem like it was put together well and didn't come off well. The crowd, there wasn't too many moments where, as opposed to in weeks past, where they could really pop and enjoy the show. So F for Raw.
Dude, it just felt lazy. It felt like the people who were writing the stories and the bookings just went and dug through the trash and like, you know what? Let's try to do this again. And it was awful.
A couple notes on SmackDown. You definitely realize that the women's division is much more featured and prominent on the SmackDown show. Oh my gosh, what a talent disparity. My goodness. But for me, I would have liked to maybe seen Charlotte wrestle other people besides going right for the title. I know that she is the big draw, that she's the main eventer in terms of the women. She's the go-to talent in terms of the women's division. But to see her maybe elevate the likes of a Natalya, or to have a renewed feud with somebody else, might come across a little bit better. Let Naomi kind of reign supreme for a couple of weeks, and then let Charlotte kind of work her way through the division, even though they know that she's a dominant force. Let her go through and destroy some people, and let her become, the talent that she really is in the superstar. But to immediately have her just come in and be like, I want a title shot, and to have her defeat Naomi last week and then have the way the match ended this week in a DQ, I think it wasn't exactly right. That's how it ended, right?
Yes, it was a DQ.
Because I was passively watching both shows because nothing really.
It was awful.
I was passively watching.
Brutal.
Like when you said Braun Strowman lost, I only saw the part where he threw Kalisto into the bin and then threw him off.
Yeah.
Because I tuned out the part where he lost. Even wow,
dude, it was atrocious. Again,
yeah.
Make her earn it, right? Make her earn it. Get invested. Like, make me get invested in watching this character. Make me feel her strife. Make me feel her struggle, right? Make her work her way up the ranks. She's brand new.
Tell some new stories, yeah.
She's the new kid on the block. So why not have her sit there and beat up a Carmella? Why not have her sit there and fight a Natalya? Why not sit there and have her fight a Becky Lynch? Make her earn it so she can then take on Naomi for the belt. Make them earn it. Get me invested. Draw me in. None of that's going on here. Absolutely none of it. It was absolutely brutal, man. It was... Again, more lazy booking, more horrible shows, and then you've got Shinsuke Nakamura. And look,
insulting each other is corny.
And yeah, the whole thing with Dolph, I really feel like this is Vince McMahon's way of dealing with foreign characters. Okay, I felt like if I was Nakamura, I would feel totally disrespected by this angle and by this bit, because basically Dolph comes out and insults him left and right. Kind of mocks him for the way he talks, and it just comes off as being really, really insulting. And this guy right here, he is now the face of your brand, because John Cena's gone away. John Cena's gone to go do another movie and to be the part-timer that John Cena's becoming. Okay? So now this guy right here, this is going to be the dude who's going to sit there and carry your SmackDown brand. And at this point, SmackDown really feels like sloppy seconds to Raw. You know what I'm saying? It's like getting with that one girl and all your buddies have been through her, and now it's your turn. And do you really want some of that? No, you don't. Do you know why? Because it looks like dirty roast beef. Just flapping in the wind. Dirty roast beef. That's what you got, and that's what you're looking at, and that's what I get with SmackDown. On top of that, your champion is Randy Orton. I'd much rather watch paint dry. He is just boring. Boring. Like, eat your boogers boring. It's awful. I can't wait for him to lose his belt to whoever. Hopefully it's Jinder. Let him lose it to Jinder. Push Jinder, and let's get this going. Because you know what? I could stand to watch Jinder win the belt, get him a little bit of a run. Maybe he holds it for 2 months. Maybe he holds it for 3. I don't care. Just get the belt off Orton, because Orton looks really uncomfortable as champion, and his promos have gone down the drain, and he looks really checked out at this point, and I can't stand it anymore.
Now, you have this great article that I did read. Tell the audience about kind of a new way of looking at WrestleMania in this article that was presented. Where can they read it?
Okay, so there's a website called stillrealtous.com, and basically this recounts WrestleMania 33. And WrestleMania 33 was flip-flopped around and basically was put in a garbage can and then pulled out, thrown into a blender, and then what we got is what we got. So this is what the original plan was and what everything was building towards for WrestleMania 33, and I think most of you will agree that this would have been a much better show. So originally what was supposed to happen was The Undertaker and John Cena were supposed to feud with each other. And I think we all would agree that that would probably be a little bit better than seeing Roman Reigns. It would have been not really a good match because Undertaker's declining health and John Cena can't carry a match. Even though I love the guy, he can't carry a match. But there was this thing that was brought up by Kevin Dunn, and if you don't know who Kevin Dunn is, he's basically Vince McMahon's lapdog. He's his yes man. He's his right-hand dude. So Kevin Dunn goes to Vince and says, hey, how about we have John Cena propose to Nikki, and we can work an angle with her and The Miz, and they can win, and then at the end, John will propose to her. And Vince was like, yeah, let's do this. And John Cena was like, no, I don't want to do this. So then they go back and forth, back and forth. John Cena gets promised a title, gets promised the belt, gets promised the championship win, so he gets his 16-time WWE championship, and he eventually says yes to this, okay? But now what would have originally took place was the Undertaker would have defeated AJ Styles to win the WWE Championship. Taker then would reportedly set to drop the title at the Elimination Chamber, where he would have been eliminated by John Cena. So that's how John Cena would have got his belt. According to the report, AJ Styles would then have won the title back and defended it against Randy Orton at WrestleMania. Now you're tying the Royal Rumble into it all, okay? At that point, he would already have turned on Bray Wyatt in the Royal Rumble match. Then, as far as The Miz goes, Shinsuke Nakamura would have debuted before Mania, and those two would have fought for the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania, which I think would have been great to watch. If you've not watched any Nakamura's matches, they are awesome. And then you would have had Taker versus Cena at Mania, and that would have basically closed out the show. And that would have been kind of the torch passing, because Cena is eventually going to sit there and work his way into that Undertaker-esque role where he's kind of the guy. He's the huge draw right now. And any house show that he's attached to, he sells that Bad Bad Larry out. His merchandise sells like hotcakes. Whether you love John Cena or you hate John Cena, he is quintessentially the dollar mark for WWE. So if you like him or you don't like him, it doesn't matter. That guy pushes the goods and he moves the ticker. So that being said, Cena's going to eventually move into the Undertaker role where whether he's a part-timer or not, he's going to be the big box office draw. So it would have been a much better plan. You would have had Nakamura, you'd have had him going against The Miz, probably would have won the Intercontinental Championship. You would have had Styles. The whole thing with Styles would have made some actual sense then, because you would have had Styles with his belt, and he would have sat there and took on Orton, which would have been a really good match. You've already seen tidbits of that, and then they could have sat there and prolonged that after Mania. It would have all made much more sense. Instead, we got what we got for WrestleMania.
No, 100%. I think that right now we'll both be looking to see that this Payback kind of move things along, and we'll see kind of how some feuds develop. But when you look at it, the last couple weeks, the shows kind of have felt like they could have they left you wanting a little bit more. And so hopefully the pay-per-view will reshape things and obviously pay-per-views, usually the talent definitely works hard and puts on a great performance in an effort to kind of, make the show special. And I do think that Payback has a chance to be a good one with the talent that's on it. But yeah, the shows, especially when you're investing 3 hours for Raw, 2 hours for SmackDown, got to be a lot better going forward. And I think you and I were this week left disappointed, and that's why we'll cut the Doc and Jock Wrestling Report a little bit short, because the shows were not that good this week. Next week, they got to do a much better job of, moving this along from WrestleMania, because there is a lull post-WrestleMania, and they got to do a much better job of kind of keeping the fans' interest around the time of SummerSlam.
You know how many other things I could be watching? How many other things that I've got to keep up on, and other things I've got to do, whether it be for my actual job or for what we're trying to do here or for anything, sitting there helping out around my house even. You know what I'm saying? I've got a bajillion other things I could be doing. Instead, I'm watching Raw, and I'm watching SmackDown, and I'm sitting there contemplating whether or not I want to take a nail and hit myself in the head with the hammer in the nail to push it into my brain, and hopefully I just die because it's so absolutely brutal and atrocious.
quick producing on the fly here. Do you want to add one more segment on top of the Tigers talk? Because there's some major news going down all over the Twitterverse regarding the four-letter network. I think it's worth talking about a little bit and touching on the layoffs at ESPN because as the names keep scrolling, it's unbelievable who's been laid off, and I kind of have a couple thoughts about it. So do you want to talk a little bit about ESPN and the Tigers after this break?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, let's keep it going, baby. You're listening to Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. All right, I want to tell you about one of our finest sponsors. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag, you definitely got to check out Fanatic U. They got several locations all across Metro Detroit. They've been a longtime sponsor of ours. They're Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you're looking for some Detroit Tigers gear, Pistons, Red Wings, you got to go check out Fanatic U. They have a sweet selection of gear that'll keep you looking fresh when you're going out and about, and especially nowadays when you're going out to watch the Detroit Tigers destroy teams like the Seattle Mariners. You want to be fresh, you want to look cool, and Fanatic U will definitely take care of all your sporting needs. Definitely go check out fanaticu.com. Sir, tough day in the media business on Wednesday, and we've talked about this, and you've heard this kind of talk, coming down the pike that ESPN was going to lay off a lot of people, and it's really tough being that you and I are on Twitter quite a bit, and you see the likes of Trent Dilfer, you see the likes of the hockey guys that are being laid off, you see the likes of a Jason Stark who's been at ESPN 17 years, and overall, it seems like the majority of the talent that's been laid off is handling it pretty well, but for me, it is kind of tough knowing that the business that you're trying to go into is super tough, and you could have a great career, similar to like a Terry Foster, and you could be going along, and you could be doing your thing, and maybe a health problem kicks in, or maybe a new program director comes along, or the company develops money issues, and guys that have been working at ESPN for decades, guys that we grew up watching, like an Ed Werder, a longtime NFL reporter, he's now out of work. If you have talent, you don't think that some of these guys are going to be laid off for a long period of time. But in the media industry, a lot of people are looking at, wow, what's going on over there at ESPN, especially in terms of the fact that many people looked at ESPN as the holy grail of jobs. Like, I'm going to work up, I'm going to start off in, Iowa in a remote city, work my way up to the big-time TV show, and then hopefully with the chance to maybe land at ESPN. And now a lot of people are looking at it and going, you know what? Based upon the model, and if you've read anything at all, you realize that in a couple of years, ESPN is going to be financially in a lot of trouble based upon what they've spent. And now you're seeing the likes of talented individuals being laid off. And it's really sad to see all across Twitter in that the majority of the people that are laid off or let go are announcing it via their Twitter platforms.
Well, yeah, that's their direct contact to people like you and me and whoever else follows them. So I totally get that. But you're right. It is difficult to see, especially there are people out there who you go to for information. I mean, Ed Werder is just one name. That guy's been doing it forever, it seems like, When he sits there and he reports from out in front of the Dallas Cowboys practice facility, that something's going on. Or when he's sitting there freezing his butt off in Minnesota and he's sitting there talking about what's going on with Adrian Peterson a couple years ago, that this is something this is breaking news. You need to tune in and you need to listen. And I don't know if you can just sit there and take any old name, any old face, and just kind of throw it up there and then throw the ESPN four-letter brand right there in front of them, and it's going to be the same, Here's kind of the deal. This is something that I realized with ESPN a little while ago. So SportsCenter used to be like appointment viewing. You
had to watch it, yeah.
You used to tune in and used to watch it, and even if it was on replay, I remember when I was sick as a kid, I would watch the replay over and over and over, and when Stuart Scott and Rich Eisen were sitting there doing the reports, I could sit there and recite everything, and you sat there and you hung on every word. The only person who I care to sit there and watch right now is Scott Van Pelt. That's the only one. He's the only one who has a little bit of a personality. I like Buchagras, but I'm not going to stay up to watch him. Do you know what I'm saying? He's not appointment viewing for me anymore. And it seems like as ESPN has continued along, they've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And as they've gotten bigger and bigger, there's been a disconnect with the viewing audience. Like, I don't need to sit there and go to that anymore. When I sit there and I lay in bed, I don't turn on ESPN anymore, not unless there's actually some kind of game on there that I'm actually watching. Otherwise, I'm on Fox Sports Detroit watching some local coverage, or I'm sitting there maybe turning on Fox Sports sports show, whatever.
FS1?
Yeah, what is it? I don't know. It's like $2.19 for my DirecTV viewing or whatever. Otherwise, I'm going to the internet for everything else that I need. You know, I've got like 9 different apps on my phone. You know how fast my battery dies on my phone? I get like a half a day's use because my phone's just blowing up like the Twin Towers all the damn time. That's just what happens. So I don't know. ESPN, I don't, it's not appointment viewing for me anymore. So I get it. I understand why they've got to do the cutbacks. I mean, you basically have neutered all of your personalities. And at this point, you are just throwing up any nameless, faceless person, and you're just throwing the ESPN tag in front of them, and you're expecting me to watch it. It's like, you can only feed me crap for so long before I'm going to go try to find me a steak.
And if you're a fan of wrestling and you can relate to this comment, I think you'll understand. In that, when you build personalities and when you build characters and you have a business model where these stars kind of start demanding a little bit more money, you look at it like you had a roster full of WWE talent. And what the network is trying to do now is say, you know what, we're a big platform. We're going to have a bunch of NXT type talent, and we're not going to pay them as much, and we're going to let the brand speak for itself because of our coverage. And when you have a situation like this is what's going to continue to happen, is that I don't see moves like this drawing more people in. And so what needs to happen, similar to the WWE, is that they need that transcendent star, that one star that they can bring on that potentially could draw viewers back. They don't have that. They have a collection of journalists that are okay, but you said it yourself, and I think that's the problem that they have, is that their business model is not correct. They've overspent to get the rights in order for people to come in. At the same time, when they did that, people said, I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to have cable anymore when I can get my Netflix at a way cheaper price, and I can get my sports viewing at the bar. I don't need to have it at my house. I can go watch my 1 or 2 sports events a week at the bar. I'm going to cut the cord. And when you have that model and you don't have too many situations where you have, sellable talent, it's not something that you or I are watching. I couldn't name you outside of maybe the midnight show. I forgot their names already.
That's Van Pelt's.
Van Pelt's show is good. Yep. Van Pelt's show is good. And then they have the guys from LA. They do a good show with the African-American guy and the other reporter that they have. Yeah, see, you can't even...
Jay something. I don't know.
Yeah, you just forget. A couple of the guys that are doing in L.A., I don't even know their names.
Well, that's the thing. And here's... Right, and they tried this whole rebranding thing with Michael Smith and Jamil Hill. It's atrocious. It's absolutely horrible. And I know you like Jamil, and she's been on the podcast. It's a brutal show. I like Michael Smith. I think he's totally miscast in that role. It's an awful show. It sucks. It's brutal. I'm just telling you, it's garbage. All right, I can't watch it. They try to sit there and they try to mix like pop culture references. It just sounds like just the most ignorant stuff you can ever hear, and they try to wrap it around sports. It's brutal, man. It is atrocious. All right, and then on top of that, you've got like 9 other guys who are just as bad at their job. And look, man, you've had to have done something right in your career to be able to get to that platform and to be able to do that, right? You've actually attained something in your life. So, hey, good for you, but your show sucks. It's not fun to watch. Nobody has any personality. Like the one guy who I like, Trey Wingo? I like him. I like SVP. I already said that. I like Ryan Russillo. I think he's good.
His role there is going to be reduced.
Yeah, see, and I think he's one of those guys who's actually talented. He says things you want to listen, you want to watch. I think him and Danny Cannell have formulated a little bit of something. I actually prefer SVP and Russillo. I thought that show was much better. But whatever, man. It's just, these are just a few guys, There's nobody else there. Like when Stuart Scott was doing it with Rich Eisen, and you had Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann. I mean, like, that was appointment viewing. You know why? Because you let these guys have some personality. You let them do the damn thing. You let them be them and sit there and tell you a story and take you along for the ride. And now I've got some underwear model who sits up there. What's his name? The dude from Cuba. I don't remember his name. Mm-hmm. But you got that guy who used to be a model over in Italy, and he does whatever he does now. And he's kind of funny, but just kind of funny, I mean, you can sit there and poop in a bag, set it on fire, and put it on somebody's porch. That's kind of funny to me. Doesn't mean it's good.
Let me read you this tweet, and I think that it hits home to some of the things that are causing a problem at ESPN regarding a model of programming that they have. This person named Kyle Feldscher put out a tweet and it said, "The public, ESPN, what we want is more sports news and less people yelling at each other on TV." From ESPN. Okay, we're going to fire the news people. So many people are thinking that, you know what, ESPN built itself upon the Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless debate model. But people watched it. Right, it has a niche. But what they're saying is they're going more towards that.
Yes.
And less towards the guys like that I grew up watching, like the Bob Lee and the Outside the Lines. Yep. And that there needs to be a little bit more of a fit. And the biggest problem is I think that many people are realizing that it's not due to these guys' lack of talent. And Ed Werder deserves to be at ESPN. It's the fact that they made a business decision that is wrong. Okay, and let's look at it this way, just in terms of our simple platform here. We're profitable. Now, are we making ESPN bucks? Are we making free press money? No.
Free press money.
I read the Gannett report. I read the report where it said how much money's coming in. The company Gannett brought in $700 million in the quarter, but they're running at a loss of $2 million, meaning that they spent out $775.
Right.
So they had cash in the bank. It just was reduced by $2 million.
Right.
So if we had $700 million coming in, you know how much profit we'd have in our pockets? $699,999,000. So that's the problem, is that these people are not losing their jobs because of their talent. They're losing their job because the business model is not being sustained from the people at the top who didn't have the foresight to realize that, oh boy, that there's trends happening that are costing us. They need to cut. They needed to kind of see this through and maybe save some money and maybe not spend so much on some rights, and maybe you cut back on some basketball coverage, or you cut back on some other things in terms of maybe not going out to the Australian Open and covering everything, or maybe on a smaller scale not sending 4 or 5 reporters to Italy to cover Michigan and what they're doing.
Did Stephen A. Smith get fired?
No, of course not. No, so the way we look at it is, for the podcast, is that we're not running at a loss. Otherwise, why would we do it? So that's a simple model. Like if I said to you, hey, Adam, we're going to go take on a $700 a month payment and we're going to go get a bigger office, you'd be like, huh? Do we have $700 at all coming in? You'd be like, hell no. But if we did that, then I have to say, you know what? Maybe we got to cut Vito. Maybe we got to cut Jason. Then it's just me and you. And you look at it and you go, we wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. We run it in a way where we can keep doing it, have a good time with it. We do other things to support it, but we run the model where we look and we say, hey, is there an opportunity to cut costs on the website? Is there an opportunity to cut costs on the hosting? And you say, yes, there's opportunities to do that. But we run it in the basic model of we bring in more than we spend. And unfortunately, ESPN's business model and the leaders, unfortunately, let the reporters down, and it's tough. And for me, my thinking is these guys got to go, a bunch of journalists got to go start their own thing like a Bill Simmons and make it their own thing. Like, look at what athletes are doing. They want their own media. The Players Tribune is their own media outlet. Journalists have to band together and create their own business model where they can have their own media platform and hire people from within and start their own thing. And that's why I'm always of the opinion of, looking at what Adam Carolla did. At the height of his career, got fired from CBS Radio, had no contract, said, okay, this is what I know, I'm going to podcast. And in 2 weeks, he got 4 million downloads, and he made it a business model. And he said it openly throughout the run of his podcast. And I strongly encourage you to listen, because he's got great wisdom on life and comedy. And he just said, look, this is my talent. I'm going to podcast for a year, maybe a year and a half, and make no money. But I'm going to figure out how to build an audience and then start making money later. So he invested a year of his life making no money on his podcast, and then he became the #1 podcaster in the entire podcast world. So that's just the way I look at it. It is a sad day for media members, and it's, as we come across all the tweets and stuff like that, people are commenting and showing support. But these people will land on their feet. You just realize that ESPN is not anymore the holy grail of jobs, and it's a sad time for those in that situation. It's not a sad time? The Tigers, man, they put in a hurting on Seattle. If you want to check out someone that hit the nail right on the head, Vito did a great series preview on the Free Press, and he talked about the struggles of the Seattle Mariners pitching. And Game 1, holy hell, they destroyed the Mariners, and King Felix looked awful, pulled after 2 innings. The Tigers, had a little bit of a concern with Jordan Zimmerman in Game 1, but after that, they gave him an extreme amount of run support, and it was an awesome opening game for that series. And I look at it and I go, wow, 11-8 at the time of this recording, still in first place, an up and down team, but kind of rounding into form in terms of what we can classify them as. It's an above average offensive team, but really a team that is going to need to improve on the defense and in the bullpen. But hey, might as well win while you have these struggles. It's good. It's a good time right now to be a Tigers fan.
It's a team that makes you feel really, really uncomfortable.
You're uncomfortable right now?
Dude, I was watching that game last night, And they sit there, they have their 9 runs in the 5th, and I'm like, all right, cool. And they're sitting there and they're just kind of rocking and rolling. It's, what is it, like 16-4 or whatever it is. And I'm like, all right, cool. When do the wheels fall off? When do the wheels fall off? Because you know the moment they go to the bullpen, something crazy is going to end up happening.
Yeah, you got 10-run lead, and you're still nervous. You're still bringing out Wilson, Jimenez. You're still bringing out 4 or 5 members of your bullpen.
And that's my point. That game the other night when they sat there and they beat the Mariners by 10 runs, you should have sat there and you should have had Zimmerman sit there, get you into the 6th, maybe into the 7th, and then after that, you should have just been able to turn it over to a guy like Anibal Sanchez.
Then there's something wrong with you. You're certainly not very good.
Well, thanks, Donald. How about you just sit down and shut your mouth, okay? So here's the deal. How is Anibal Sanchez even on this team at this point? That's a huge question.
His check. You can't pay somebody $21 million to leave.
Dude,
that's a lot of money.
You're going to have to, because all he's doing is taking up a spot in your bullpen.
Listen, I know it's easy to spend other people's money, but imagine the podcast, okay? And we got Vito. He's a great superstar, and we paid him $25 million. All of a sudden, his ratings tank.
You can't compare this stuff, though.
It's the same thing.
No, it's not. It's totally different.
It's $20 million.
This is totally different.
You can't write a check for $20 million for nothing.
For one, we're not million and billionaires who have multiple businesses that are pulling in equity and pulling in money.
The same thing.
All right. On top of that, we are not an athletic franchise that just sits there and makes stupid contracts and doles them out to guys. Anibal Sanchez needs to be cut like yesterday. Okay. Over the weekend, you had a game that I think it was like 10-4. You put him in there and he basically gave you 2/3 of an inning and he gave up 2 runs. You can't afford to keep this guy up here. He's taking up a spot in your bullpen, for one. All right. 2, you can't count on him for anything. 3, he's sitting there and he's just holding down a spot that you could bring somebody else up and see what they got and probably put you in a better shot. If I was to sit there and I was to tell you, hey, look, we've got a 6-run lead. And we need to sit there and we need to turn this game over for the next 3 innings to Anibal Sanchez, Buck Farmer, Shane Green,
Blaine Hardy.
Who are you going to go with?
Kyle Ryan, Shane
out of
Green.
these guys, who are you going to go with, though?
Can't go with anybody. You can't trust anybody.
But you would go with Buck Farmer out of all of them because Anibal Sanchez is a complete dumpster fire.
Can't trust nobody. You're absolutely right. But in the end, it goes to this. The reason why he's on the roster, and it's abysmal, you know it, I know it, Vito knows it, Jason knows it, Jerry knows it. Everybody that's podcasting in Michigan knows that Anibal Sanchez is not qualified to be on the Detroit Tigers. We all know it. What's the reason he's on the squad? It's the fact that if you cut him, you're going to have to pay him a check for $21 million to go away. And you can't do that.
Here's the thing.
Especially after you paid someone, you paid 2 other guys $13 to leave.
That's fine. You screwed up when you signed these guys, all right? So DFA him, all right? Hopefully somebody else picks him up. Nobody's going to pick him up because nobody wants to pay that contract. So DFA him, send him down to Toledo. Let him work on some stuff. And if that way he's still in your organization in case somebody's arm falls off.
And I do believe...
I'm sorry, I'm yelling.
No, it's okay.
I see you holding your ear. I'm sorry.
No. I was saying to myself and gathering my thought is that he'd have to clear waivers, which he no doubt would do. But I think as a major leaguer, he has the right to turn that down. He doesn't have to go to the minors.
Well, that's fine. Go sit on your couch then.
But see, that's the problem, is that we all would say that, go sit on your couch, but I'm not going to have you go sit on the couch with $20 million of my money if there's any chance.
So you're going to let him cost your team chances to win games? Look, right now they are first in the American League Central, right? They are first. And you're going to sit there and you mean to tell me you're going to sit there and let this guy basically just implode any chances you have of possibly making a run in the playoffs? I mean, this is the point in the season where these games do matter. Each game matters. You've got to sit there and you've got to get a lead. You've got a Cleveland team that is on your heels. You have a 1-game lead on them as well as the White Sox. All right, you've got to sit there and you've got to start winning games, and you need to start doing it a lot more convincingly than the way you're doing it right now, because all of us feel uncomfortable with this team. Look, like you said, it's a team who can sit there and hit the ball out of the ballpark. Doesn't matter which ballpark it is, they're going to sit there and they're going to lace the ball out of there. All right, it's got a pitching staff that has the chance of being really, really good. Also has the chance of being really, really bad. It's kind of a roll of the dice depending on what you're going to get that day. I think we can all agree Michael Fulmer's pretty damn good. Justin Verlander, when he's on, he's really good. When he's off, he's not so good. All right, Daniel Norris has shown some promise. Matt Boyd, some promise. Zimmerman, he got a win the other night. Hooray, okay? That bullpen, garbage. Absolute garbage. Even our guy, Joe Jimenez, our dude, the dude who we've talked about, he's looked shaky in a couple different outings. I mean, and that's the guy that all of us were like, oh yeah, let's crown him. He's gonna be the next bullpen savior. and it's not there. It's basically Wilson and Wilson that are carrying this bullpen, and you can't use these guys every single day. This is the same conversation we had last week. Is this Bizarro Land? I feel like it's Groundhog's Day.
Wow, quick update. Jay Crawford laid off.
No way.
Yep. He just tweeted out, after 14 wonderful years, my time at ESPN's over. From Cold Pizza to First Take to SportsCenter, I made more friends than I can name. Forever grateful.
I was going to say,
wow.
dude, I really liked him on Cold Pizza. I thought Cold Pizza was really good.
As Wednesday progresses, you're going to see a lot of names that people, it looks like a lot of on-air staff, writers, behind the scenes. It is a bad time, to double back on that. But with the Detroit Tigers, to relate it, they just can't do it. I know that it's hard, but you have to ask, objectively, why is he on the team? And the reason he's on the team is they're going to try to squeeze any productivity out of him. Are you going to get it? The answer is probably going to be no. But the best answer would be to force him to go to the minors, spend 3 months there, fix whatever issues going on. But I think that we are all coming to the realization he lost it. He's done. He's done as a pitcher, and you're on the hook to pay him $20 million.
Can he hurt himself playing Guitar Hero like Joel Samaya did? Is that possible?
It's a totally terrible situation, and it's affecting a lot of things. But another player that's affecting the Tigers and making a boatload of money on his contract is V-Mart. Now, he had one game, a breakout game on Sunday, but when you look at the numbers, you realize, oh boy, do you think he's going to turn it around? Or are we starting to look at the decline of a once proud Major League Baseball hitter?
Dude, I think his time is over, and I think it's kind of caught up to him really fast.
You think it's done, huh?
Yeah. Watching him sitting there swinging the bat at the plate, he has trouble tracking the ball. He can't sit there and turn on the fastball anymore. The changeup has him fooled, and good God, throw him a curveball or a cutter, it's lights out for the guy. I think it's done. I think it's over for V-Mart. This is kind of where my mind was, all right? You've brought up Jim Adducci, who I just heard a recent interview with him. He's now becoming my favorite Tiger. I enjoy that guy. He was awesome to listen to. And you've got this guy, John Hicks. And John, both these guys are journeyman ball players. Both of them are basically hitting the cover off the ball at this point. When Miggy comes back, all right, because right now he's on the DL for a groin injury, and that groin's not going to be 100%. It's way too early for him to have a groin injury. It's going to linger all season long. So when Miggy finally gets back, do you think that you keep Hicks on the roster and you let Hicks play at first base and you move Cabrera to DH, and that way you rest V-Mart, maybe him taking some time away, he can maybe figure something out, and then he can come in and play some spot duty? It's just a way to sit there and try to get the most production and protect some of these older players. Putting Hicks out there, he does a decent enough job at first playing defense. He's hitting the ball. Cabrera can then come in and play DH. You're not requiring him to move as much. All he's got to do is go up there and swing the bat and run the bases. And then at that point, V-Mart can come in whenever you see that there's a situation where he can make an impact. And maybe once you get his confidence back, it's something for him to build off of.
No doubt about it. I think that's a very viable option. The thing that many people are also looking at is, wow, Alex Avila versus James McCann. Alex Avila is producing offensively. James McCann as well is producing offensively. So you're looking at other guys stepping it up in the absence of Miguel Cabrera, but V-Mart continuing at DH and continuing to bat fourth is a big problem for the Detroit Tigers. You need JD Martinez to come back. That should ease up the tensions there. But, it's tough to talk about offensive struggles when the Tigers just destroyed Seattle and scored 19 runs at home, tying a record, or I think breaking a record in terms of scoring the most runs ever at Comerica Park. So you look at it and you go, it's a good problem to have where V-Mart's struggling, but other guys are picking it up. Castellanos is picking it up. Ian Kinsler's doing some things. You got guys that are coming from Toledo that are contributing offensively. You're getting some power from Alex Avila. So other guys are picking it up that can mask some troubles. Upton is contributing here and there. So you look at it as that right now, you're 11-8. You need V-Mart to kind of work his way out of it ahead of the series versus the Cleveland Indians. And that's what I think they're trying to do, is they're trying to say, okay, play your way out of it. Let's continue to evaluate. They're not willing. Their mindset is these kind of players, they eventually water finds this level, and they don't agree with your assessment that he's done. They think that, look, Miguel had a slump early on, and he's got a track record of being, a Hall of Famer. V-Mart has slumped in years past, but he's also a career 300 hitter that is obviously not going to be the guy that's going to crank the ball out of the ballpark as much. What's really concerning is the lack of extra base hit power that we're not seeing as of yet, which leads you to believe, oh boy, Has he lost it in his legs? Can he drive the ball anymore? And when you have a guy who runs so slow that maybe I could beat him in a 40-yard dash, then you look at it and you go, you got a big problem. So Victor Martinez is an enigma and a guy that we have to continue. But it's a good problem to have when you have young guys come up and contribute. And it's a good thing, too, because as you rely on more and more guys from the minors, should there be some more injuries that occur, you feel a little bit more confident that, they can come in, contribute, help this team win. But for me, a concerning player that is paid a lot of money that I'm really nervous about is Jordan Zimmerman. His stuff hasn't been the same, and it doesn't look right. He seems like he's fighting his control. His pitches don't seem to have the snap and movement like they have in years past, and not every game that he pitches are the Tigers going to score him a ton of runs. Jordan Zimmerman's got to turn it around because he's getting paid not only a ton this year, but for the foreseeable future. I'm a little bit more worried about him than I am right now about Vmart, although I could say my concern level is rising with Vmart. Shane
Green's another one, too. He's got to work on his command and his control. He didn't look very good the other night when he was sitting there pitching. Again, this team seems like it has a ton of bloated and inflated contracts that are just doomed to cripple this team. And somehow, some way, they are able to sit there and kind of keep their head above water. And making its way into May, I think this team needed to basically be at 500, maybe a game or two above 500, and just kind of see what you got. The hope was that everybody could be healthy and we could get into May with healthy guys and everybody could kind of get into their own groove. They've been able to battle through some injuries. You got your big bats with JD, Miggy, Vmart's totally disappeared. These guys are sitting there either struggling with injuries or they're just not producing at the plate. And then you've got your bullpen, which hopefully water finds its level and hopefully that kind of shakes itself out and turns into maybe not better than average, but maybe just an average bullpen. I think we could live with an average bullpen if they could figure it out. They're doing all the right things, and they're getting it from a lot of weird spots. I mean, you sit there, you call two guys up in Anducci and in Hicks, and both those guys come up, and they both produce with multi-hit games. You know what I'm saying? And then you sit there, you look at a guy like Ian Kinsler, you look at a guy like James McCann. He's leading your team in home runs. If I would have told you last year James McCann's going to lead your team in home runs through the first month of the season, you'd have sat there and you'd have told me I'm crazy. You'd have said you're smoking crack. And I said, yeah, I might be. Because I wouldn't have believed it myself, And then you look at a guy like Alex Avila who's come up and he has hit timely and he's driven in quite a few runs and he looks to be playing at a much more comfortable pace and much more comfortable place in his career. So it's been really eye-opening to see some of these secondary talent guys, not the big bats, not the guys who are basically driving the bus, but the guys who are sitting there in the seats behind those guys. And they're the ones who are doing all the things that are needed to help this team win games.
But at the same token, you're destroying teams that you should destroy. Sitting at 11-8, you're going out there, you've won series versus Boston, Minnesota, Cleveland. Now you're going to get a chance to destroy Seattle. You're going to play the White Sox. The big thing now is to kind of just play well in the next upcoming series, and then you got to really focus on the 4-game set at home versus the Cleveland Indians, Monday, May 1st, through Thursday, May 4th. That's going to be a key series to look for, but I see them being around 500 for the month of April. But hey, the good thing is, as much concern as you have, they're still in first place in the AL Central, where the outcome of their poor play is not going to be punished as severely as if they had played in the West or in a different division. They're playing in a really craptastic division where they can take advantage of some teams.
Yeah, you're right on there. It's a good thing that they're playing where they're playing because it does mitigate a lot. I mean, the one thing that you can say, though, is it's kind of a log jam right now. I mean, Kansas City's not playing well at this point, but Cleveland, Chicago, they're right there on Detroit's heels. Minnesota looks like it's going to be a formidable contender this year. So Detroit can't sit there and take nights off, but you're right. If they have a bad game here or there, it's not going to impact them like it would if they were playing out in the West or if they were playing out in the East.
So from our talk today, do you have any less concern or realize that, hey, the impact of their bad play is not going to be as detrimental as maybe you may feel after we talk? I think that you could be better served to have a little bit more confidence that, hey, if you looked at some of the positives in terms of the contributions, in terms of the offense, in terms of the fact they're still winning despite some key injuries, yes, the defense looked porous in the last week. Yes, the bullpen has concerns. But at the same token, they're still above 500, still in first place.
I would rejoice if they cut Sanchez. If for some reason we finished this podcast and I was heading out to my car after I left the studio and across my phone it says that the Tigers had DFA'd Anibal Sanchez, I would sit there and I would take my clothes off and I would run around naked outside. Then I'd come in here and we'd cut another show for another half an hour talking about how Anibal Sanchez is gone and how I'm the happiest guy alive. Because I think he's clogging things up and I think he's a hindrance to this team right now. I think if you DFA him and he sits there and accepts the deal, goes down to Toledo and works on some things, I think you're in a prime position then. That being said, I think the way this season's going to roll out from now until the very, very end, and I think they're going to be in playoff contention when it's all said and done with. I think we're going to have a lot of uncomfortable weekends where we're just going to sit there, we're going to come in after, and we're just going to sit and be like, wow, did we just win that series? Doesn't feel like we won that series. Or, wow, we almost won that series, but hey, our defense kind of cost us. Or, hey, our bullpen kind of cost us. There is no perfect team in Major League Baseball, okay? This team, more than any, though, has really, really bright spots and has glaring needs and glaring holes all up and down it. Most teams don't have such extremes on them, and this team is going to sit there and just, I think, cause us headaches over the course of the entire baseball season. Like you said, they're in first place right now, and they look pretty decent. They're beating up on the teams that they need to beat up on, and we've got to sit there and watch how they play against teams like Cleveland, Chicago, Minnesota, and Kansas City going forward.
All right, I'm looking forward to the week ahead for the Detroit Tigers. I'm a little bit more confident in looking and skewing my perception a little bit more in the positive end, knowing that, yes, there are a lot of things that you can be concerned about. We both had them in the mid-80s, and that's where they're kind of trending. But you would look at it and you say, hey, if you can continue to kind of stay afloat, not sink under the pressure of having these injuries and that terrible bullpen, and you can have that strong series versus Cleveland with no worse than a split, then you can go forward with the month of May because it's going to be tough, where the month of May is going to be a strong barometer as to where this team is. And Doc and Jock will definitely stay abreast as to the happenings with the Detroit Tigers, as well as several other podcasts on this fine network. For Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. What a podcast we put together here. Damn near 2 hours flew by, and I feel like there's probably 10 other things we could talk about.
There really is.
My goodness.
We can talk some more about the draft.
I'll be enjoying the draft. I have a good feeling when we come back and talk next, when you meet again with Doc and Jock, it's going to be a fun time. And it'll be a time of hope, and it'll be a time of rejoicing and looking at that great schedule. And we'll definitely peek at it because I know we didn't get a chance to talk about it today. We'll peek at that fine schedule because you know what I think. You know what Jason thinks. We'll pick it up next week with the Jock and what he thinks about the schedule and our draft recap next week on Doc and Jock.
Go Lions.
This was locker room talk.
Second dick.
Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I have voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me. They talk to me. They tell me things that I will do. They show me things I'll do.